Welcome to INSEAD from wherever in the world you're connecting from. And my name is Felipe Monteiro. I am a professor of strategy here at INSEAD. And today I'm delighted to have Marco Stefanini with us. Marco, thanks for joining us. And the way we're going to proceed in this webinar is basically, Pascal, if you can go for the next slide. Um, in those webinars, you are muted with video off, but you can have the Q&A tab where you can ask questions throughout the session. So feel free, don't have to wait until the end to ask questions. And you can upvote, so automatically it ranks. So when we open up for the Q&A part, we will automatically see which are the questions which resonate with most of you. This is being recorded, and you see on your screen an email address. So if anything is not working technically, feel free to send an email to the email that you see on the screen. So kind of done with the webinar etiquette. You see in front of you two cases, right? And this is one of the rare situations where I wrote two cases about the same company. And the reason I did that is because a few years back, when Mark and I met, we were in the middle of digital transformation. So, right, we go back 7 years, 8 years ago. And what was very interesting at that point was to see how Stefanini, one of the very few global multinationals from an emerging market like Brazil competing all over the world, they were transforming, helping their clients to transform, but also they were being transformed themselves. So it was a fascinating moment to see how a family-owned firm that is pretty global is doing that change as it was helping the clients. And last year we were again revisiting the strategy of Stefanini, and again one of those critical moments where if 7, 8 years ago the conversation was about digital transformation, today the conversation is all about AI. And I'm sure you've been attending different webinars and sessions and meetings about AI. And I think today we'll see AI, of course, on how it can be applied in real cases. And Marco has some experience to share with us. But I think also interestingly to see from a leadership perspective, as the CEO and founder of the company, how he has been dealing with that tremendous opportunity, and also know what the implications that has for the organization of the company, for the clients they're working with. So this is the context. You must have received a link to this case at the end. I know that Pascal will also put on the chat another link. So if you're interested, you can kind of go in and read again and get all the details. If I were to summarize, and I will go kind of quickly at the beginning, just trying to share with all of you why, I got interested and why INSEAD got interested in writing those cases about Stefanini, is if you go back, this is a pretty young company, right? As many other emerging market companies, pretty young, right? Less than 40 years old. And we're going to go back and I'm going to ask Marco about, the beginnings of the company, but, small revenues, and right, 40 years ago, less than 40 years ago, and then you fast forward today, and you see a company, as I was saying before, one of the few Brazilian companies that is present in more than 40 countries, competing head to head, right, with very large established global players. And over those decades, and those decades, for those of you who are familiar with Brazil, those were not easy years, right? We had a lot of crises here and there. There's even a book about Marco and about Stefanini, right? The book was published in Brazil and it's called The Son of a Crisis. So you get a sense of, wow, how many crises he and the company has to go through. But I think, over the years, right, that moved from being a Brazilian company to be truly a global company with a lot of their clients being global multinationals, a lot of their presence, right, in many, many different countries. And if you look right here, what we're trying to describe in this slide is somewhere, right, in 22, 23, you see, right, how AI, right, and the application of AI really got so much more uh, weight. Although I will show later, right, this is not a new thing, and actually, Mark and I we worked on AI issues a few years back. But again, you see, overall, when companies and when most of us start to really pay serious attention to AI with all the LLMs and ChatGPT, so on and so forth, which implied a big change. If we go to the next slides, please. I think what is important as we have this discussion, and just as background, right? And then we're going to hear firsthand from Marco how things evolved over time, what's happening now, how they built this strategy. This is a kind of $1.5 billion revenues last year, and as you can see here, pretty global in terms of presence. Pretty labor intensive to the extent of having 35,000 employees all over the world, different service centers in different parts of the world. And that is right. You see that it says something around along the lines of that is a family-owned business that has the name of the founder, and which somehow and has his own commitment to the success of the company still. And I know that a number of you are also coming from kind of companies that are either family owned or that has a family as a reference shareholder. What I find fascinating in terms of positioning in the case of Stefanini is this idea that at this point they are big enough to be seriously considered by any client. And I was talking to another digital company recently, and they were saying, no, the challenge for us as we go global is, we need to convince people that we are serious, right? Coming from a country like Brazil, we still need to convince people that we are serious. I think it's interesting in the case of Stefanini, they've been through this, right? So showing that they are serious is no longer an issue, right? With such a global company, so many global clients. But it's how do they combine that global presence and being kind of globally recognized with the agility of a small, right? Still that startup thing. And it's interesting, right? So what I heard Marco saying before and other people talking about Stefanini is this idea, how can you be serious enough to be considered by any global multinational and at the same time is small enough, right? That the founder still visits and meets with the clients. So I think it's a little bit of that spirit, right? We're going to hear more from Marco soon. And then I think after getting this, if we go closer to where Stefanini is today, you see this kind of big ecosystem of so many players, right? And we're happy to see INSEAD's logo there. So meaning, a company in tech, global, with those global clients and those right? Those different verticals, different areas, different business, different industries. You cannot do this alone, right? So they have partnerships and relationships with so many of companies and logos that you can easily recognize there. But maybe what cuts across all of them, and you see there, right, something that says AI, right, Stefanini AI. It is kind of that layer of AI being present, right, and being more and more present in this business ecosystem. Among those different areas, right? There are things that Stefanini is super strong, right? Has financial sector and financial tech, as you see there. Not surprisingly, for those of you who are familiar with Brazilian financial sector, some of the most sophisticated players in the financial sector in the world are based in Brazil, right? If we go back for many, many years of hyperinflation, this is a sector that is very at the forefront of digital, at the forefront of AI. So now, right, as we move forward to agentic AI, so on and so forth, there are some user cases in Brazil which are global reference. So not surprisingly that this is a very strong area for Stefanini, but you see many more, right? Many different industries, so on and so forth. So is this a new thing, right? So to what extent, and I'm sure, right, you've seen so many companies talking about AI today and say, yeah, that when that conversation emerged a couple of years ago, that remind me that 5 years ago, and if we go to the next slide, 5 years ago, we were launching the Global Talent Competitiveness Index, which I'm the academic director in Davos. And at that year, in 2020, uh, the topic of that year, the theme of that year of the report was already global talent in the age of artificial intelligence. And typically, when we publish the report, we ask different thought leaders and business leaders and public policy makers to write a chapter. And I remember going back to Marco and to the person at Stefanini who heads their AI initiative about what's the opportunity for Latin America on AI. So this is something that we're being, and Marco himself has been looking for a number of years, and Stefanini looking for a number of years. But certainly today, this is a big topic all over the world. The implications for how companies will not only do kind of small pilots, as everybody's doing now, many experimentation, but how do you really change and restructure and make a big difference like many companies have done in the past about digital. Now it is the AI challenge. I hope those slides gave you a background, right? A little bit more context into this fascinating company. But let me stop showing slides and let me invite Marco to join us. Marco, thanks again. You've been a tremendous partner for INSEAD for many, many years. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Felipe. It's always my pleasure to be here with you and INSEAD, a great organization. Then thanks for the opportunity to share our history.
And Marco, as you talk about history, let's start with the beginning, right? So when you started, it was a small IT, very different company as you are today. Can you maybe share with the people kind of joining us today? I mean, the big transformation moments that you had in this organization from 87 to today.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you. Um, in the beginning, yes, as you said, is almost 40 years ago. Yes, and the scenario, the environment that time, it was very different. Mainly in Brazil, yes, no investor, hyperinflation, no support for entrepreneurs in Brazil. And in the summer, it was a hard scenario. Yes. Then I can say that in the beginning, I had the first challenge was survive. Yes, because of course I began without an investor. I didn't have money, and we needed to create our own funding. Yes, during the first 5, 10 years, and of course it our growth in the beginning was not so great. Yes, and then we also create this DNA more resilient. Money is always very important for us because we don't have this money, and for us that's always this a solid financial position. For example, we never had any year with losses, never. We always are profitable, not a high profitability, but always profitable, very consistent company. Okay, this is, I think, the first challenge. The second challenge is to be global. Yes. Then we started many operations, mainly in Americas, Latin America, and North America, but in a small position because it's greenfield. We began since scratch. Yes. Uh, but to be honest, one of turn point was when we did our first acquisition from a IT organization, US. Is they are quite global, and then complement us very well. And then we jump in terms of global perspective, global position, and also global experience. Okay, I will stop here. That's maybe to you to give more
No,
questions.
that's great, Marco. And I mean, this is not an usual path for a Brazilian company. A lot of the Brazilian companies, they just stay inward looking, right? They just, Brazil is such a big market. Let's focus on Brazil. What prompted you since the beginning to have this more international orientation and starting going to the US, etc.?
Yes, it's a good question. I think most of our audience is not a Brazilian. That's maybe they don't know about Brazil, but Brazil is, as you said, is a big country in terms of geography. But any usually the big countries are quite isolated countries. Yes, and we were and we still are isolated. Okay, then and mainly for technology. Why I did it this way? Yes, I think that's maybe I can summarize in three very simple points. It's not so sophisticated points to be honest. One is, of course, the world is much bigger than Brazil. Brazil is a good market, but not comparable with others, big, much more powerful countries like US, in Europe, and others. Okay. The second, it's maybe most of the people don't know, but the technical people are very good. Yes, they can mix business and technology, and they have a good level in terms of technology. And then third one is my personal position that I love to travel. That's I try to mix, and I love to travel because I love to know different cultures, to learn about other countries, and maybe this is that excited me more about my journey.
And that's clear, Marco. And you talked about culture and you as the entrepreneur, as the founder, right? I mean, a lot of startups, right, when they grow, somehow, and I'm sure people in our audience will relate to that. They start becoming more bureaucratic, slower, right? So all this, startup spirit, right, and that entrepreneurial culture. I mean, anything that you can share in terms of how over time you moved from a small company to now, right, a multinational, multi-billion company. How do you keep this kind of founder's mindset? Maybe a couple of things that you do and you've been trying to do at Stefanini.
It is a challenging question that I can say that most of the entrepreneur usually they prefer to create, yes, to grow and not to operate, to administrate. That's I think during the time we needed to upgrade, to change our profile, our skills. That's during the time that depends on the size of the company, depending on the challenges, because change during the time, not only because of our size, but the market too, that we need to change our skills. That is, we need to be very humble to learn and to mitigate our weakness because everybody has a lot of weakness. Yes, I think this is the first one. The second one is not try to not to lose in terms of our DNA. Yes, because in the end, any startup, any company that is beginning, usually they have a very entrepreneur DNA. And I think the base is the ownership model. Okay. I think for me, when I educated my two boys, yes, and you know them, I think that P&L is the best uh, um, uh, lessons learned that you can have. Yes, because when you have to manage a P&L, that's it's very important for any executive, any leader. Then for us, during the almost these 40 years, we try to keep this more ownership model, this more P&L model that is always there are some owners. You are the owners. We are responsible. Of course, we needed to adapt because when we grow, we need to align better the delivery. There are a lot of functions that we need to align. But as far as as possible, I can say that I avoid the matrix model. Yes. I avoid this. I think that's because no less ownership. I think this is. I think it may be some tips or some lessons learned from me. Of course, during the time, as any other company, we pass through ups and downs. That is part of the game. Sometimes we can lose we can know we lost a little bit what I can say founders mentality as the more
Mhm.
DNA, and there are a lot of time that's okay, we did a step back, okay, go to the roots and come back. That's of course always to understand the new market, the new organization, but try to keep these foundations, as that I understand that is so important.
Marco,
And
thank you.
in the end,
But
maybe the more important message: try to avoid egos from the leadership. Yes, egos in the corporate is always very dangerous. Yes.
so, the two things you learn from Marco: avoid matrix organizations and avoid ego. So, that's kind of two elements of his recipe. But Marco, one thing that studying Stefanini came across to me as an important element of that too is what you call cells, right? So your own organization, you organize through those cells. Can you say something about what are those cells? How do they work?
Okay, good question. We call sales, or when we go through international operations, we call business units. That is the same concept. The idea is exactly give it to the leader of this cell or business units through P&L, through business units. They run almost like a small company. Yes, of course, during the time we needed to adapt. For example, in the beginning, each sales they have their own delivery, but of course, that's some years later that could be a chaos because everybody do their job in different patterns, different standards. Of course, we need to adapt it.
I think we're getting some technical issues with Marco's
One
video.
that's responsible for the
I think you're back, Marco.
it's come back. Okay, sorry. That's
Yes.
the idea is always not to lose the P&L, the idea of responsibility of that business units. Okay, this is quite very it is very important. Mainly when we are dealing, we are managing uh, big companies as a client, and they always asking some personalized solution that we are not a standard company. As we always, for example, we implement SAP, or I can implementing a social tools administration or management, but always there are some characteristics different from one client to another one, that we needed to be responsiveness, we needed to be fast, agile. This is quite our DNA. Of course, during the time, we needed to push more. Is not perfect, as I'm saying here, but always my drive is try to push the company in this direction.
Thank you, Marco. And I think it's interesting, right, in terms of context, to see how many of those emerging market companies they have this model of having, you call it cells, higher in China called micro enterprises, but somehow give P&L responsibility to smaller teams to somehow keep that agility. Uh, and talking about agility, you're not in an easy market, Marco. You are in an industry that you're competing with giants, the Indians, right? So the TCSs and Infosys, right? The Accentures, the IBMs, uh, and they all have, and they are much bigger than you. Can you share with us, how do you compete with those kind of big companies with your structure?
Now, it is interesting because we can see that if you see evaluate only ourselves, that's we are 35,000 employees. That's quite a reasonable number. But if I see, if you compare with Accenture, that's 700,000, and others, giant Indian companies, 300, 500. That is not an easy job, but it's quite interesting. I think that in your introduction, we touch in this point that we try position our in terms of globally speaking, we position ourselves in the middle. Okay, as you said, that's we are big enough to be global, to have conditions to invest in any new technology, have a very high standard in terms of delivery. IT delivery is always difficult. On the other hand, we can still be small enough to be agile, uh, flexible, and really we can be a really customer-centric company. That's, I think, is one of the key points that we never lose, and always I pay attention to this. That's we need to be not only in the speech, but in a real life, a very customer-centric company. And as you said, you give a very simple example. I visit a lot of clients. During 1 year, I visit at least 100 more clients, much more than 100, to be in touch with them. That's listen them. Listen the front. Yes, not only the client, but also listen the front in terms of teams, because this is what we can say the battlefield. Yes, that we can feel what is happening.
Marco, some people may say, okay, that's fine, but don't you regret having investors, right, and being much bigger than you are now? Because, you were saying in the beginning, always being, cash is king, no losses, being very conservative to that extent of, it is no big debt, no big. Do you regret sometimes, maybe, right, I could be 10 times bigger if I had investor A or B?
For sure, that's no free lunch. Yes, that's any decision that you take. There are pros and cons. Yes, in my scenario, almost 40 years ago in Brazil, I don't see. I don't regret. I didn't regret. Why? Because the interests in Brazil was always, as not was, are, yes, always high. That's, I think, is almost impossible to a company to survive with loans, with high interests, and we are not we don't have so high profitability. Yes, then I didn't regret in my scenario. Okay, but of course, as you said, and I said in the beginning, clearly when we don't have invest, we take much more time to grow, mainly in the beginning. We pay for this. Clear is this, okay? That's at least to have a reasonable size to invest. I took maybe 10 years, yes. And today, 1 year, 2 years, we can do different, yes. On the other hand, again, is no free lunch. That's I have the opportunity to see in a more long-term vision. I can change my company like we pass through a lot of different technologies. You mentioned only two, but I passed through others. That's digital transformation and AI. Then it is allowed me to be free, to not to think only in the next quarter. Yes, that's again is a positive for my in my view is a positive perspective. Other is, of course, I have to learn almost everything alone. Yes, no investor because they can contribute sometimes. not only negatively, but also positively. Yes. What I did to balance, we had a board, yes, established the last almost 20 years, is 18, 19 years that we have a board. That is always we have to balance. Is no perfect decision. Yes, that is no perfect environment. And we try to leverage the positive aspects. Yes. And also now we have a good size that as we are very positive cash flow company, allowed us to invest, to grow, to acquire companies. Of course, not big ones, because of course my pocket is heavy limits, but I can do. That's again is not easy evaluation. Yes.
Sounds good, and that's a very good connection to the next topic I had to discuss with you, Mark, which is this ecosystem strategy and acquisitions. And you know, if I remember again, all those different verticals and sectors, and we have so many companies there. Can you share with the group here today? What was the logic of building that ecosystem? How do you, right, have so many of those small companies? What is the kind of challenge of integrating or let them have autonomy?
The contest that was that time around 2013, 14, 15, around this. Yes. We in that time we just did the acquisition some years before. In terms of global, we became a global company, and we had a very ambitious plan to grow more in IT space. But in that time, I realized that maybe it could be not a good decision to continuously investing in. Of course, I have to pay this investment because no investor in IT companies. Then we decided to stop and began to invest in a niche companies, small companies that bring more value-added services, more in the business side. That's I think it was a hard decision that time because most of that companies were small. They were not profitable. In the opposite, they lost money in that time. Okay. But the most difficult maybe that time between 2015 and 2018, that's the B2B market, they delay too much to absorb digital solution. For me, this is a killing point. Yes.
Okay.
Because usually if you evaluate in the past, B2C, the market, the B2C increased a lot in terms of digital transformation, but B2B always they talk more than they do. And of course, we are investing some solution that we invest in time, not only money, but more time and energy. And in the end, the big companies were not great to buy service in that area. The digital transformation began to grow, really grow, 2019, 1 year before the pandemic. And of course, during the COVID, of course, they grow much more. This is, I think, and we can compare a little bit. There are similarities with AI. If you see the personal perspective in B2C, of course, the people are using much more AI. But if you see in the global companies, the corporates, they are still beginning. They
Hmm.
may still they talk more than they do. Yes. But if you want, we can explore later more. Okay.
No, that sounds great, Marco, and maybe right as we talk about AI, right? I was saying 5 years ago, right? You were writing this article about AI and talent for Latin America. I mean, maybe know a lot of people here today. They heard about different people talk about AI, but maybe from different perspectives, right? Maybe from US or China. So kind of being in Latin America as a right originally based, but being all over the world, and 5 years in the US. I mean, can you maybe share how first when you see that things were really changing, right? Because you already working on this for many, many years. What was the change, especially for B2B? And what and how things change in maybe in the past 1 2 years, as you think about the implementation, specific projects, specific cases, what can you share with us?
Okay, we can explore. I think this is an interesting and important subject. Yes, as you said, that we began to work with AI 14 years ago when we acquired a very small company, and even before the ChatGPT, we had a good experience in terms of AI, but it was a very different times. Yes, for two aspects. And ChatGPT changed this for two aspects that they change a lot. One is, of course, it is now a much more powerful solution. Any LLM, not only ChatGPT, than any other. Okay, and become our life much easier to implement automated solution. Okay, in terms of results and powerful solution. Okay, but the second one is equal important. They become automation popular. Yes, they democratize this automation because it's so easy to do, to manage, to and the pressure that is now is the opposite. The C level is pressure. The technology, the company. So
I think we're having the same issue with the connection.
now is the
Now we're
opposite.
back. Now we're back.
Sorry. Back. Okay. That's I will repeat here. It's important that what happened. Okay. In the past, we need to convince the company to doing to automate. Now is the opposite. Okay, this is I think the two big changes in terms of ChatGPT. Then what we decided in 2 months later, in January 2023, okay, we decided to open for the whole company. All the 35,000 employees that time can use our our tool, but in a private, in a controlled environment. That is so important, okay? You know that there are many people that are discussing because the privacy, that we didn't see this kind of threatened, and we decided in that time correctly, because if you are talking, if you are working in a controlled environment, no issue. Yes. Then we open for the whole company in a controlled environment. This is the first one, and the people are they are allowed not only to use but create their prompts or there's accelerators in that area. This is the first one. What we did together, we centralize in only one platform. Is okay for you? Yes, okay, okay. Is a centralized platform that we can see in our mandala, SAI. Yes, Stefanini Artificial Intelligence is only one platform. And of course, there are a lot of initiatives globally for different countries, for different purposes, but only one platform. We force the people to centralize. Then we can measure everything what is happening. And also we create a team in AI, not create because we already had, that we structure better the AI team to support the areas, because we always think that the areas need to be the leader of the initiatives, not the AI guys. AI guys are facilitators until now. Okay, this is what we did. Then I can understand that 2023 was an experience year. The people did a lot of experience.
24.
2024 was a year more to, of course, to implementing solutions with AI with generative AI, because we already implement a lot of projects with AI before ChatGPT. Okay, and this year is the year that we are calling, I like to say, massive adoption, because we have there are it's very there are very big difference between the three stages. One is experience. You are doing some like a play, you are playing with them, but it's not really bringing value. The second, when we begin to implement, we are implementing in important areas, but it not means that you will get results, because we don't have in terms of you are not using in a massive way. Yes, one thing is I implemented some solution. The other thing is everybody's using this solution. It's totally different. This is, and when we are talking about corporate, the B2B market, this is so important. This is more or less our path in terms of AI construction. And it's not so different from the digital transformation path. It's not so I understand today AI is like a digital accelerator. Yes.
And Marco, I have a couple of questions more to you, but before I go, let me just kind of remind people watching us that they can ask questions on the Q&A. There are already a few there, including one. Gonzalo is just saying that, that he worked for Citibank Colombia and they only worked with Stefanini, and he thinks it's amazing meeting you, and he didn't know that you were alive and kicking. So you're alive and active. Very, very active. So I'm gonna go to the other questions later. Let me now, Marco, maybe as you talk about future, and I know you don't have a crystal ball, right? You talk 2023, people were just experimenting, controlled environment, LLMs. Then 24 start to implement certain things, and now we're talking more about scaling up. What do you see next, Marco? Right, and a lot of the conversation today is all about agentic AI, and I mean, how do you see? Maybe can you, given that you were in so many countries, maybe can you share where do you see Brazil, where do you see US, maybe other countries, some countries you are in Asia?
Okay. I always give my experience in what we call the last mile. Yes, in terms of building solutions using AI. Okay, I'm not in the game of LLM and others. That is a different game. But I understand that AI is in the beginning. As it is in the beginning, and if you compare with the internet and others, I see there will be some winners, some people some companies that will bankrupt. That is part of the game. Yes. But in the end, the legacy will be very strong. Okay. Then I understand that we have the next few years that clearly will increase the maturity in terms of using AI, as the same process in the digital transformation. In the beginning, less maturity. And when I'm talking about maturity, it's not only in terms of technology, it's much more in terms of change management, mindset, business model. That this is, I think that's is this almost the same of digital transformation, because if you compare with COVID, yes, the technology was there. What changed? The ecosystem changed, then the people began to do it. Something that they could do many years before. Is the same here. That technology is already there. Of course, always they are the speed is much bigger. Yes, is much faster process, than any others that I've seen in my career. But in the end, I see that in the end that we will mature the process using AI in general. Okay, that's it. Of course, there are some areas that all the LLMs are exploring more. There are some focus. They are not focus everything. That's impossible. Yes, they prioritize some, for example, develop the software development. Clearly, in terms of coding, one of the key points is there. Yes, because they are very focused. But even the development cycle application, not all the areas they are developing so fast as coding. For example, testing, documentation, user cases, that is not the same pace. Yes. And the other point maybe they will explore more now. The next frontier for could be computer vision. Yes, I think that there is a good space. Of course, there are a lot of they are already a lot of experience and advanced, but clearly is a space that can do much more. Then I see this more mature in the next few years and different from the others. Big change, they will be faster. Yes, then no.
Marco, that's excellent. And let me take advantage that you talk about the computer vision and other things. I think Bruno is asking you here if you can talk more about what is SAI, right? Stephanie AI is, and in the solutions, and also some relevant user cases to business. Anything that you can share?
Of course, we have a lot. I will try to summarize, but I will go. First of all, this SAI, our platform, is a platform that we centralize all of our prompts accelerators, any other areas, and also it's a very powerful tool also to standardize. That is important because we have to be careful because even we are using AI, each person can be in a different way. That's and in the end, you are an organization that you have to keep standards in terms of security, in terms of quality, and in terms of performance. Then this is could be interesting for this. Okay, and is always agnostic in terms of LLMs. We can use any other, in anyone. Sorry. The other is we can measure everything. We can measure individually, we can measure by teams, we can measure what they are doing because sometimes they are using, but not in a so, how can I say, not so interesting way for the company. Yes,
Productive
sometimes,
way of.
yes, productive way. Okay, this is what we are. We have some challenges because now we have so many that is not easy. It's not so didactic to people to find what's the best prompt or the best accelerator for them. I think this is one of challenge that we are facing now. Okay, okay. This is in terms of cases. I can give you some examples. For example, in manufacturing sector, clearly is wonderful opportunity because most of the manufacturing sector is very behind. The OT area is very behind. And all of our platform that we are using IT, we can use in OT, including PLCs and others. This is one, we have a many projects because we have a division in terms of this industrial manufacturing automation, and is the ROI, the return on investment, is very high and also can bring different successful factors as safest environment, ESG. There are a lot of also value-added wins. Okay, the other is marketing. Marketing is also, there are a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of cases from creative area, from the area, for example, in terms of marketing sites, the measuring social tools, insights. There are a lot of areas that's wonderful. The other is data. Data is always expensive to implement, and AI can help a lot. The other area is the in terms of banking, yes, there are a lot of opportunities. Okay. The other is cyber, because you know that the cyber crime, they are using AI, and we need to use AI too to defend ourselves in IT perspective. We already talked about development cycle, all the areas, documentation, testing, coding, user cases. We have a lot of all of them. We have a lot of cases. We have more than 300 projects and services, not MVPs, not POCs. I'm talking about a real project in a big scale. Okay. For example, in call center, in any call environment like service desk call center, we have a global deal with one of the largest payments industry global, and we are using then AI for the last 2 years in the services, and the payments in the highest level in terms of security standards. For example, we have a luxury industry. We have a lot of cases globally, one of the largest group global that we are using AI. If you go for infrastructure also, there are a lot of automation behind the scenes that we are using. In the end, summarizing this, we can be efficient, more efficient, but also we can increase the quality, time to marketing. This is one part of the game. The other part of the game is what solutions, what offers then I can build with this powerful tool that it was not possible in the past. This is another perspective. Yes, one is efficiency. The other perspective is what we can do different for the market. Yes, of course, it depends on the industry, and also we are helping our clients in this way that is more sophisticated, but clearly can add much more value.
Marco,
Sorry
we
for
have
the
still
long answer.
no. That's a very complete one. So we have a lot of questions. So maybe I will ask for quick answers. Let me start with one which is interesting. Juice is asking, what AI tools are you personally using? What can you say in 1 minute?
ChatGPT is one of you that I'm using, but also Gemini. Okay, that's we are very agnostic, and we have okay. That's okay.
Okay,
Good.
ChatGPT, Gemini, anything new?
Short answer.
Anything that you start doing, that you start using recently that you were not before? Because these are two that everybody uses. Anything very new
Be
that
honest, I'm not so a heavy user of AI. I'm always, for me, it's I'm thinking what can AI can transform my company. I'm not so a heavy user if you in a personal
okay?
perspective. I will be very honest.
Very good. Another quick one, Marco. Colleen is asking you, what's the best hiring platform process for you to find tech expertise? So, you talk about, talented tech expertise and tech talent. Any tips on how do you get the best talent?
That is a 1 billion answer. Yes, that is difficult. Yes. I think that's I know maybe what I you answer that is more or less that many people are asked. Not only focus in the hard skills, yes, in the technical skills. Focus much more in soft skills, even more now with AI, because technical skills. For example, if you see in terms of technology, the development clearly is decreasing in importance. It is much more important what we can do in terms of solution. That this kind of and also for me, that's how these people are open to learn. How people is humble enough to listen and learn. This is maybe one of the key questions to evaluate.
Marco, we are kind of almost finishing. So before I ask you a final question, let me take one question from the audience here, which is future looking, which is asking, you know, this is a company that bears your name, family owned. How do you think about succession?
This is a It's a very important topic, yes, because everybody has their own cycle. Me too, yes. And interesting, we had a good session yesterday with our board about this. We are talking a lot. Uh, what we are doing is, of course, developing the people because I see the succession is not only with me, that is a process through the company. I think we quite invest, but we are investing more in the last year. That's for me, I have to speed up this process. The second is simplify the organization, that I'm very focused in simplify the organization to leave a better legacy for the next generation. That is for me, it's so important. For me, it's very important and consolidate our global position. I think this is the three points that you are working in terms of succession.
Marco, any final thoughts and remarks to people watching us today? It is right, and as context, right, you are also very involved with negotiation between Brazil and the US. So you're someone who has really this global uh, reach in what you do. Um, and if any final tips for people watching us in terms of what's coming next, what would you suggest?
I think that may be the final message. Maybe we didn't touch a lot. That is as interesting because I see the developed countries maybe quite similar to the emergent countries. That's and the environment, the scenario is not so stable in the like in the past. And now I think that is even more the resilience. Yes, I think resilience is so important, independent of your culture, your country, because in the past, that is more happened with the
Emerging markets.
emerging markets. That's for me resilience to be resilience, and also, of course, because all this learning process to be humble, to listen and learn. That's I think maybe but this we already talked about.
Mark, that's wonderful, right? And knowing you for almost 10 years, I can see that what you're speaking is the way you behave. So, what I remember from this conversation today is kind of first, your initial ambition. Brazil is not, it's big, but there's much more in the world. Uh, Also, this constant search for this agility, being agile, being very close to right to customers, and not losing this agility and adaptability. I think you said it many times, how important is to be humble, and you are such a humble person. But also, I think you finish, right, and we are in the business school. It is the idea of the importance, as you said, it's not only about the technical aspects, right? That was the same thing about digital. Digital was digital transformation. Transformation is about change management, is about leadership. And you're saying the same thing now, right? How important it is for you to look for the soft skills. And finally, right, this idea of how you continue to learn all the time. I can say for myself, I learned a lot from this conversation today. Thank you so much, Marco. Thanks to all of you who are watching us today. And please feel free to check for the Stefanini case. Thanks again, Marco.
Thank you. Have a nice day for everybody here. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.